not as a villain, but as the voice of brutal clarity. The whisper in the storm that no one wanted you to hear, because he didn't write for the idealists. He wrote for those ready to outgrow illusions, for those brave enough to admit the world isn't fair and waiting for fairness. That's a strategy for staying powerless. You've heard his quote, "It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both." And you were taught to reject it, to recoil, to label it dark, manipulative, wrong. But you misunderstood him. He wasn't telling you to be cruel. He was telling you to be felt, to be non-negotiable, to develop a presence so defined that people pause before crossing you. Because people don't respond to how kind you are. They respond to how clear you are, to how unmeetable you are, to how much weight your silence carries. You thought moral purity would protect you, but Machiavelli understood. Appearances shape reality. Perception governs behavior. Truth means nothing if no one looks long enough to find it. That's why people respect confidence over compassion. That's why they fear stillness more than kindness, because stillness is unreadable, and unreadable, it's untouchable. Machiavelli knew it too. He said, "You have your way, I have mine. As for the right way, it does not exist." Because he saw what most don't. Morality isn't fixed, it bends with power. And when you don't question its frame, you become a tool of it. The good man isn't rewarded. He's expected, used, forgotten. And Carl Jung took it deeper. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. That's what's been happening to you. You've called it bad luck, misfortune, fate. But really, it was obedience. It was unconscious surrender. Because you thought being predictable made you noble. But no one told you predictability is a weapon. And when people know how you'll respond, they stop respecting your presence. They start leveraging it. They don't push because they're cruel. They push because you trained them to. Because your empathy became a tool of delay. Because your patience became a script. And while you were explaining your truth, they were moving the goalposts. While you were waiting to be seen, they were rewriting the rules. All in silence. All behind that smile you trusted. This isn't about becoming cold. It's about becoming aware. Because Machiavelli's brilliance wasn't in manipulation. It was in understanding human nature. When power enters the room, he saw it clearly. People rarely do what is right. They do what they can get away with. So if they got away with using you, it's not always because they're evil. It's because you allowed the frame. The frame where you over-explained, overgave, overweighted. The frame where your suffering had no cost, where your boundaries were just suggestions. And let's be honest, no one walks away from a system that benefits them. Not without pain, not without confrontation, not without enforce it. Own the terms. Because morality that costs you your sovereignty is not virtue. It's slow suicide. And the person who walks through life without controlling their frame, they're not living. They're being written by everyone else. So, this is your turning point. Not to harden, not to hurt, but to see. To outgrow the illusion that being lovable protects you. It doesn't. What protects you is being unreadable, is being felt, even in silence, is being a presence that shifts the room without apology. Because the new morality is not about making everyone comfortable. It's about no longer betraying yourself to be digestible. You weren't born to be managed. You were born to be unmovable. Transformation doesn't begin when you learn something new. It begins when you unlearn what was never true. You've spent years trying to become more lovable, more agreeable, more tolerable, more manageable. You silenced your truth to be palatable. You shaved down your edges to avoid friction. You smiled through confusion, hoping they'd see your goodness and finally stay. But here's the truth. The ones who needed you smaller were never going to love you whole. They only loved the version of you that didn't threaten their illusion. The version that didn't speak too loudly, want too deeply, or see too clearly. So you buried the real you, the intense you, the passionate you, the version that spoke with conviction and walked with certainty, not to heal, but to survive. But what if I told you the very part you buried is your source of power? Not the power to control others, but the power to no longer need permission to exist. That's the shift. You stop asking, will they still love me if I say this? And you start asking, will I still love myself if I stay silent? Because power isn't about dominance, it's about clarity. And clarity feels dangerous to people who benefit from your confusion. They liked you better when you doubted yourself, when your guilt made you compliant, when your kindness was unconditional, even when they gave you conditions. But now, you're not explaining every thought. You're not shrinking your truth into something digestible. You're not softening your fire just to keep the peace. And they feel it. They feel the stillness in you, the unreadable silence, the sharpness of your presence. They say you've changed, and you have, because you've stopped bleeding just to keep them warm. This isn't about bitterness. It's about boundary. No more overthinking every message. No more editing your words to avoid discomfort. No more guilt when your no is the answer that saves you. Machiavelli didn't say to destroy others. He said to avoid being destroyed by them. And for too long, you've been participating in a slow, smiling form of self-destruction. But now, you pause before you reply. You calculate before you commit. You observe before you offer access. Because your presence is no longer free. Your energy is no longer a donation. Your silence is no longer a blank check for others to cash. You don't owe anyone your availability. You don't owe comfort to This isn't detachment, it's selective access. And yes, it will feel strange at first. The stillness, the distance, the shedding of old identities. You'll feel the urge to explain yourself, to clarify that you're still a good person, to reassure them that you haven't changed too much. But don't. Because goodness without boundaries is not love. It's self-abandonment. And you're done with that. You're done pretending you're fine just to avoid confrontation. You're done shrinking so no one feels insecure in your presence. You're done proving yourself to people who were only ever trying to disarm you. You are not here to be easy. You are here to be true. True to your pace. True to your intuition. True to the version of you that doesn't bend when pressured, but sharpens. Let them call it ego. Let them call it distant. Let them say you've lost your warmth. They're not wrong. You've simply stopped setting yourself on fire just to keep others comfortable. And when you stop burning, you start seeing. You start building. You start choosing. You start becoming someone even you can finally trust. And that's the shift no one can reverse.